My name is Serenity, and at 28, I thought I knew my father. Until the day he sat across from me, in that sterile lawyer's office, his weathered hands signing papers that would transfer my grandmother's entire estate, to my inheritance to my stepbrother Jake, for a measly $50,000. You should be grateful I'm giving you anything, he said, his voice cold as winter steel. What happened next would expose a web of lies spanning decades and reveal the true monster hiding behind his fatherly facade. The family I thought I knew was about to crumble completely. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and ultimate justice, I want to know, where are you watching from today? If family drama and shocking revelations are your thing, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this journey is about to get wild. Trust me, you will not see the ending coming, and by the final twist, you will understand why sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply the truth. 3 weeks before that devastating meeting, I was living my ordinary life as a graphic designer in Portland, Oregon. My grandmother, Rosalind, had passed 6 months earlier, and while grief still felt fresh, I found comfort knowing she had always promised her Victorian house and savings would come to me. She raised me after my mother died when I was 12, and that house held every precious memory of our time together. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was working on a logo design for a local coffee shop. My father's voice sounded different, strained, almost guilty. "Serenity, we need to talk about your grandmother's will. There have been some complications." Complications. The word sat heavy in my stomach like spoiled food. I had not spoken to my father much since grandmother's funeral, where he spent most of the time whispering with Jake and Jake's mother, Patricia, the woman he married just 2 years after my mother's death. Their hushed conversations and meaningful glances had felt odd then, but grief makes everything feel surreal. "What kind of complications, Dad?" I asked, setting down my stylus. "Just come to the lawyer's office Thursday at 2. We will sort everything out." The law office of Henderson and Associates smelled like leather and disappointment. When I arrived, Dad was already there with Jake and Patricia. My stepbrother looked like he had won the lottery, that smug smile I remembered from our teenage years when he would break something of mine and somehow make it my fault. Patricia kept smoothing her dress and avoiding eye contact. Attorney Henderson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began reading from a thick folder. According to the amended will dated 18 months ago, Rosalind Chen's estate, including the family home and all assets totaling approximately $400,000, will be transferred to Jacob Patterson with a provision for $50,000 to be given to Serenity Chen. The words hit me like physical blows. Amended will. 18 months ago, that was when grandmother was still sharp, still herself, before the small stroke that left her slightly confused in her final months. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, but Henderson shook his head. "I have the signed documents here, witnessed and notarized." I stared at my father, searching his face for some explanation, some sign that he was as shocked as I was. Instead, I found guilt written in the lines around his eyes and the way he could not quite meet my gaze. "Dad, this cannot be right. Grandma always said things change." "Serenity," he interrupted, his voice carrying a sharp edge I rarely heard. "Your grandmother realized Jake would be better positioned to maintain the property. He has a family stability. You are still figuring your life out." The condescension in his tone made my cheeks burn. I was 28 with my own business, a steady relationship with Marcus, and a clear plan for my future. Jake was 31, divorced twice, and currently working at a car dealership after his latest get-rich-quick scheme fell apart. Better positioned, my voice climbed an octave. Jake has never even visited her. I was there every Sunday for dinner, every holiday, every doctor's appointment. After her stroke, Patricia finally spoke, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Now, Serenity, you know Jake cares about family. He just shows it differently." The absolute audacity of that statement left me speechless. Jake had not even attended grandmother's 80th birthday party, claiming he had food poisoning. Later, I saw photos of him at a football game on social media that same day. "Can I see the will?" I asked Henderson. He slid the papers across the polished table. My hands shook as I read my grandmother's signature, but something felt wrong. The writing looked off. Grandmother had arthritis in her final years, making her signature increasingly shaky, but this looked different. Too neat in some places, too forced in others. When exactly did she sign this? I pressed. March 15th, according to the date. My heart stopped. March 15th was the day Grandmother had been in the hospital for 3 days with pneumonia. I remembered because I had taken time off work to stay with her. She was barely conscious on oxygen, certainly not capable of making major legal decisions. That is impossible, I said slowly. She was hospitalized that entire week. I have photos, medical records. Serenity, my father's voice cut through my words like a blade. You need to accept this. Your grandmother made her choice. You should be grateful you are getting anything at all. Grateful. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. $50,000 from an estate, worth nearly $500,000, taken from the woman who raised me and given to a stepbrother who treated her like an inconvenience. But something else was happening in that room. Jake kept glancing at Patricia with an expression I could not quite read. Patricia's hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. And my father looked like a man carrying the weight of terrible secrets. I want copies of everything, I said, standing up. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of paper related to this will. Henderson nodded reluctantly. You are entitled to copies, of course. As I gathered my things, Jake finally spoke. Hey, Serenity, no hard feelings, right? Family is family. I turned to look at him, really look at him. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of what might have been fear disguised as confidence. Right, I said quietly. Family is family. Walking to my car, my mind was already racing. Something was very, very wrong with this entire situation. Grandmother would never have changed her will so dramatically, especially not in favor of Jake. And the timing, being hospitalized when she supposedly signed the documents, that could not be a coincidence. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the copies Henderson had given me, studying every signature, every witness mark, every notary seal. My grandmother had been many things: stubborn, particular, sometimes difficult, but she was not a liar. And she had looked me in the eye just weeks before her stroke and said, "That house will be yours, sweet girl. Everything I have worked for will be yours." Someone had stolen my inheritance, and I had a growing suspicion it went much deeper than just greed. This felt personal, calculated, and cruel in a way that made my chest tight with rage. As I drove home, one thought kept circling through my mind: if they could forge a will, what else had they been lying about? That night I called my best friend Maya, a paralegal at a family law firm, and asked her to meet me at our usual spot, a 24-hour diner downtown, where we had solved countless life crises over coffee and pie. When she saw my face, she immediately ordered us both double shots of espresso. Someone forged my grandmother's will, I said without preamble, sliding the documents across the sticky table. Maya put on her reading glasses and examined the papers with the methodical precision that made her excellent at her job. After 20 minutes of silence, broken only by the occasional and interesting, she looked up with a grim expression. You are right to be suspicious. Look at this signature compared to these older documents you brought. See how the pressure changes midway through her name. And this witness signature. She pointed to a scrawled name I did not recognize. Patricia Stevens. Ring any bells? My blood turned to ice. Patricia is my stepmother, but her last name is Patterson now, not Stevens. So she signed as a witness using her maiden name. That is unusual for someone who has been married for over 15 years. Maya's eyes narrowed. And look at this notary stamp. The registration number seems off. I can verify this tomorrow, but I think we might have found our smoking gun. We spent the next 3 hours developing a plan. Maya would investigate the legal aspects, verifying the notary, checking witness credentials, and looking into the law firm that supposedly handled the amended will. I would focus on the family side, gathering evidence and trying to understand the timeline of events. But Serenity, Maya warned as we parted ways in the parking lot, be careful. If they were willing to commit fraud once, they might be dangerous if they feel cornered. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my grandmother's house, or rather what used to be my grandmother's house. Jake had not moved in yet. The windows were still dark, the garden already showing signs of neglect. Using the spare key grandmother had given me years ago, I let myself in. The house felt hollow without her presence, but I was not there for nostalgia. I was looking for evidence. In grandmother's study, I found her filing cabinet unlocked strange, since she was meticulous about securing important documents. Most of her papers were gone, but tucked behind the hanging files, I discovered something interesting. A carbon copy of her original will from 12 years ago, clearly stating that everything should go to me. But more importantly, I found her appointment calendar from the last 2 years of her life. March 15th, the day she supposedly signed the amended will, was marked hospital. Pneumonia, in her careful handwriting. The week before and after showed no attorney appointments, no legal meetings, nothing that would suggest she was planning to change her will. As I photographed the calendar pages, I heard a car door slam outside. Panic shot through me as I recognized Jake's voice talking to someone on his phone. I quickly pocketed the calendar pages and original will, then slipped out the back door just as he entered through the front. From behind the garden shed, I could hear him talking. Yeah, she was sniffing around at the lawyer's office yesterday. We need to be careful. No, she does not suspect anything yet, but if she starts digging... My heart pounded as I crept closer to the window. Jake was on the phone pacing around grandmother's living room, like he owned it, which apparently he did. Patricia handled the signature perfectly. Even I could not tell the difference. What? No, the old lady was unconscious most of the time. She never knew what hit her. The casual cruelty in his voice made my stomach turn. They had not just forged her signature. They had taken advantage of her while she was dying. Look, Dad made his choice. 50 grand should keep Serenity quiet. If not... Jake's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. I had heard enough. Quietly, I made my way back to my car and drove home, my mind reeling with this new information. Jake had just confessed to fraud, but he had also revealed something else. My father was not just an innocent bystander. He was part of this conspiracy. That evening, I sat in my apartment with all the evidence spread across my dining table like pieces of a twisted puzzle. The forged will, the timeline proving grandmother was hospitalized when she supposedly signed it, the witness signature from Patricia using her maiden name, and now Jake's recorded confession on my phone. But I needed more than just proof of the forgery. I needed to understand why. Why had my father, who raised me to value honesty and integrity, betrayed everything he taught me? Why had he chosen Jake and Patricia over his own daughter? I started making a list of everyone who might have information: grandmother's doctor, her longtime neighbors, her bank manager who had known her for decades. Someone had to have noticed something unusual in her final months. The next day I visited Mrs. Chen, no relation, just a coincidence in surnames, who had lived next door to grandmother for 30 years. She was a sharp woman in her 80s, who missed nothing that happened on their quiet street. "Oh dear, I was wondering when you would come by," she said, ushering me into her immaculate living room. "I have been so worried about you since I heard about the house." "What do you mean, Mrs.?" Chen poured tea with hands steadier than mine. "Well, it just seemed so strange. Your grandmother talked about you constantly, especially after her little stroke. She was always saying how excited she was for you to inherit the house, how she was planning to leave you her jewelry and her mother's china set too." "Her jewelry," I sat up straighter. "What happened to her jewelry?" "Oh, that Patricia woman cleaned it out the day after the funeral. Said it was hers now. Poor Rosalind would have been heartbroken. She always said that emerald necklace would be yours on your wedding day." Another theft. Another violation. The rage building in my chest felt like a living thing, hot and demanding justice. "Mrs. Chen, did you notice anything unusual in the weeks before grandmother died? Any visitors she had not mentioned?" The older woman's expression grew troubled. "Now that you mention it, yes. About a month before she passed, I saw that son of yours, Jake, coming and going several times, always when you were not there. And he was never alone. Who was with him? Different people each time. Once it was Patricia, but another time it was a woman I had never seen before. Professional looking, carried a briefcase. They stayed for hours. A professional woman with a briefcase visiting while I was away. someone who could have been a notary, a lawyer, or someone skilled at forgery. As I drove home, the pieces were finally starting to fit together. This had not been a spontaneous decision or a moment of weakness. This had been a calculated, long-term plan to steal my inheritance. They had waited until grandmother was vulnerable, isolated her from me during crucial moments, and systematically stolen everything she had worked her entire life to build. But they had made one crucial mistake: they had underestimated me. And now, armed with evidence and a burning desire for justice, I was going to make sure they paid for every lie, every theft, every moment of pain they had caused. Maya called me the next morning with news that confirmed my worst fears and gave me the ammunition I needed to fight back. "The notary stamp is fake," she said without preamble. "I contacted the state licensing board, and the registration number on your grandmother's amended will does not exist. Whoever created this document was sloppy." "What about the law firm?" Here is where it gets really interesting. "Henderson and Associates did handle your grandmother's original will 12 years ago, but they have no record of any amended will. When I called and asked about recent documents for Rosalind Chen, the receptionist told me they had not worked with her since 2015. My hands trembled as I wrote down this information. So my father lied about the law firm too. It gets worse. I did some digging on that address where you met yesterday. It is a virtual office space that anyone can rent by the hour. The real Henderson and Associates is across town, and when I described the man who met with you, their senior partner said it sounded like someone impersonating their colleague who retired 5 years ago. The scope of the deception was staggering. They had not just forged documents. They had created an entire fake legal scenario, complete with a phony lawyer and borrowed office space. This level of planning suggested something much bigger than simple greed. "Maya, I need your help with something else. Can you look into my stepmother's background, Patricia Stevens Patterson? I want to know everything: her work history, financial records, anything public. Give me until tomorrow." "But Serenity, you need to be really careful here. This kind of elaborate fraud usually means big money is involved, and people who plan this carefully are not going to give up easily." After hanging up, I decided to visit someone I had been avoiding: my grandmother's banker, Mr. Rodriguez, who had managed her accounts for 20 years. The First National Bank branch where grandmother did her banking felt like stepping back in time, all wood paneling and formal portraits. "Miss Chen, Mr. Rodriguez greeted me warmly, though his expression quickly turned somber. "I was so sorry to hear about Mrs. Chen's passing. She was one of our most valued clients." "Thank you. I actually wanted to ask about her accounts in her final months. Did you notice anything unusual?" His professional demeanor flickered slightly. "Well, I probably should not discuss client details, but since you were listed as her emergency contact..." He paused, glancing around the nearly empty bank. "There were some transactions that concerned me." "What kind of transactions?" 3 large transfers in the 2 months before she passed. $20,000, $15,000, and $10,000, all going to accounts I had never seen before. When I called to verify with Mrs. Chen, she sounded confused, said she had not authorized any transfers. My heart raced. "What did you do?" "I flagged the account for suspicious activity and tried to call you, but the number on file had been changed to someone else's." A woman answered and said she was Mrs. Chen's new caretaker, that all financial matters should go through her. "Do you remember the name Patricia Stevens?" She said Mrs. Chen had given her power of attorney due to her declining health. There it was, Patricia again, systematically isolating my grandmother from anyone who might protect her. "Mr. Rodriguez, do you still have records of those transfers and the power of attorney documents?" He looked uncomfortable. The power of attorney seemed legitimate at the time, notarized and everything. But now that you are here asking questions... He pulled up something on his computer. The receiving accounts were all closed within days of the transfers. That is usually a red flag for money laundering or fraud. "Can I get copies of these records? As Mrs. Chen's heir, you should be entitled to them, but with the estate in probate." He trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. "Let me see what I can do unofficially." 20 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with copies of the suspicious transactions and a growing picture of systematic financial abuse. Patricia had not just stolen my inheritance through a forged will, she had been draining my grandmother's accounts while she was alive and vulnerable. That evening, I called my cousin David in Seattle. He was grandmother's nephew and had always been close to the family, though he lived too far away to visit regularly. If anyone would have insights into recent family dynamics, it would be him. "Serenity, I have been meaning to call you," David said when he heard my voice. "I have been so confused about Aunt Rosalind's will. It just did not make sense." "What do you mean?" "Well, she called me about 6 months before she died, right after that little stroke. She was worried about something, said she thought people were trying to take advantage of her confusion. She specifically asked me to remind you that all her important documents were hidden in the secret compartment of her jewelry box." Secret compartment. I had inherited some of grandmother's furniture, but had not thought to look for hidden spaces. David, Patricia took all the jewelry the day after the funeral. Said it was part of her inheritance. That makes no sense. Aunt Rosalind always said her mother's jewelry would go to the women in the family, not to someone who married in. And she definitely would not have given it to Patricia. She never trusted her. "Why not?" David was quiet for a moment. "This might sound petty, but Aunt Rosalind always thought Patricia married your father for money. Said she was too interested in family finances, always asking about property values and inheritance plans. After your father retired from the construction company, Patricia kept pushing him to ask Aunt Rosalind for loans." A construction company. That was news to me. I knew my father had worked in construction, but I thought he was just a regular worker, not someone who owned a company. "David, what happened to Dad's construction business?" "Oh, that whole mess. It went bankrupt about 3 years ago. Some bad investments and lawsuit settlements. I thought you knew your father and Patricia lost everything. Their house, their savings, even their credit was destroyed." The final piece clicked into place. My father and Patricia were not just greedy, they were desperate. They had lost everything and saw my grandmother's estate as their salvation. The elaborate fraud was not just about getting money, it was about survival. But this revelation brought a new fear. Desperate people do desperate things. If they had already committed fraud, forgery, and elder abuse, what would they do if they realized I was closing in on the truth? I spent the rest of the evening documenting everything I had learned, creating copies of all evidence and storing them in multiple locations. I also wrote a detailed account of my investigation and emailed it to Maya with instructions to contact the police if anything happened to me. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang. It was my father. "Serenity, I heard you have been asking questions around town. People are starting to talk." His voice carried a warning that made my skin crawl. "What kind of questions, Dad? You know what kind. Listen to me carefully. You need to stop this. Accept what you have been given, and move on with your life. Some things are better left alone." "Or what?" The silence stretched between us like a threat. Finally he spoke again, his voice lower and more menacing than I had ever heard it. "Your grandmother's death was peaceful. It would be a shame if the same could not be said for others." He hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in shock. Had my own father just threatened me? As I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows, I realized this was no longer just about money or inheritance. This was about family trust and the horrifying discovery that the people who were supposed to love and protect me were willing to destroy me to save themselves. But I also realized something else. I was not the scared, grieving granddaughter they thought I was. I was angry. I was armed with evidence, and I was not going to let them get away with what they had done. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The next morning brought a call from Maya that changed everything. She had spent the night digging into Patricia's background, and what she found was explosive. "Serenity, you need to sit down for this. Patricia Stevens Patterson is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Patricia Ann Stevens, and she has a criminal record spanning 3 states: identity theft, elder abuse, and get this, marriage fraud. She has been married 6 times, always to older men with assets, and 3 of those husbands died under suspicious circumstances." My coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. Are you saying she killed them? I am saying the pattern is suspicious enough that you need to contact law enforcement immediately. But there is more. The woman has outstanding warrants in Nevada and Arizona for financial crimes. She is essentially a professional con artist who specializes in infiltrating families and stealing inheritances. The room spun around me as I processed this information. My father had not just betrayed me. He had brought a predator into our family. Maya, what about Jake? Is he involved or just another victim? That is where it gets complicated. I found records of Jake receiving payments from a shell company registered to Patricia starting 2 years ago. We are talking about significant money enough to pay off his credit card debts and cover his car payments. He is not an innocent victim. He is a paid accomplice. I immediately thought about my grandmother's confusion in her final months, how she sometimes seemed scared or agitated when I visited. Now I understood why. She was being systematically terrorized and manipulated by people she trusted. Maya, I want to record everything. If they are this dangerous, I need ironclad evidence before I go to the police. Absolutely not. These people have already threatened you, and if Patricia has a history of violence, then I need to be smart about this. I have an idea, but I need your help. My plan was risky but necessary. I would confront Patricia directly wearing a wire and try to get her to confess, but first I needed to retrieve whatever my grandmother had hidden in her jewelry box. That afternoon, I drove to Jake's house under the pretense of picking up some of my grandmother's furniture that was supposedly being stored there. Jake was at work, but Patricia answered the door with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Serenity, what a lovely surprise. Jake told me you might be coming by. Her voice was sickeningly sweet, the same tone she had used at the lawyer's office. Up close, I could see the calculation behind her friendly facade, the way her eyes assessed me like a predator sizing up prey. I just wanted to collect some personal items. Nothing valuable, just sentimental pieces. Of course, dear. Though I should mention most of Rosalind's jewelry and valuables have already been redistributed. Family heirlooms should stay in the family after all. The casual cruelty of that statement made my jaw clench, but I forced myself to smile. I understand. I was actually hoping to look at her old jewelry box. I think there might be some photos tucked inside. Patricia's expression flickered for just a moment, so briefly I almost missed it. But there was fear there, quickly masked by another fake smile. Oh, that old thing, I think Jake put it in the garage. Let me show you. As we walked through the house, I noticed other items that had belonged to my grandmother. Her antique mirror in the hallway, her china cabinet in the dining room, even her favorite reading chair. Patricia had not just stolen the inheritance, she had moved into my grandmother's life like a parasite. The jewelry box was sitting on a dusty shelf between paint cans and garden tools, treated like worthless junk despite being a beautiful hand-carved piece my great-grandfather had made. I picked it up carefully, feeling for the hidden compartment David had mentioned. "Find what you are looking for?" Patricia asked, watching me intently. "Just checking for photos," I replied, but my fingers had found what felt like a small lever on the bottom of the box. When I pressed it, a hidden drawer slid open. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small digital recorder, the kind my grandmother used for her grocery lists and reminders. My heart raced as I palmed both items while pretending to look through the main compartment. "Nothing here but old costume jewelry," I said, closing the box. "I guess I will take this as a keepsake." "Actually," Patricia's voice hardened, "I think that should stay here. Family heirlooms and all." For a moment we stared at each other in silence. The mask had finally slipped, and I could see the predator underneath, cold, calculating, dangerous. "Of course," I said finally. "I understand completely." But I had already pocketed the paper and recorder. Whatever my grandmother had hidden, I now had it. Back in my car, I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a letter in my grandmother's careful handwriting. "My dearest Serenity, if you are reading this, then my fears have come true. Patricia has been pressuring your father to change my will, promising him money to pay off debts I did not know he had. She has been forging my signature on documents and convinced him I am becoming senile. I am not senile, sweet girl. I am scared." On this recorder you will find proof of what they have planned. Take it to the police. Do not trust your father, he has chosen money over family. I love you more than words can say. The truth is in the recording. Grandmother. With shaking hands I turned on the small recorder. My grandmother's voice filled the car, weak but determined. This is Rosalind Chen, and I am recording this on February 20th because I fear for my life. Patricia Patterson has been threatening me, saying if I do not sign papers giving Jake my house, something bad might happen to Serenity. She showed me photos of my granddaughter's apartment, her work, her daily routine. She knows where Serenity lives, where she works, what time she comes home. I am going to sign whatever they want to protect my granddaughter, but I want the truth recorded. Patricia forged my signature on bank documents last month, stealing $15,000. She said it was practice. My son Michael knows about this and has chosen to help her rather than protect me or his own daughter. They are planning to forge a new will after I am gone, making Jake the heir and giving Serenity just enough money to keep her quiet. Patricia said if Serenity ever investigates, they will make sure she has an accident like they did with Patricia's previous husbands. I am making copies of this recording and hiding them where Serenity will find them. God forgive me for not being strong enough to fight them, but I will not let them hurt my granddaughter. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, documenting months of threats, financial abuse, and systematic terrorization of an elderly woman who just wanted to protect her family. By the end, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. My grandmother had not just been murdered, she had been tortured first. And now these same people were threatening me. But she had also given me exactly what I needed, a full confession recorded in her own voice detailing every crime Patricia and my father had committed. I drove straight to the police station, no longer caring about strategy or caution. It was time for justice. Detective Sarah Morrison listened to my grandmother's recording 3 times before speaking. When she finally looked up from her notes, her expression was grim. Miss Chen, what you have brought me represents multiple felonies across several jurisdictions. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, and potentially conspiracy to commit murder. We are going to need to move quickly. Within hours, the police had obtained warrants for Patricia's arrest based on the outstanding charges from Nevada and Arizona. The local district attorney was building cases for the crimes against my grandmother. But Detective Morrison warned me that arrests would likely trigger Patricia to flee and possibly to make good on her threats against me. We are going to offer you protective custody until we can bring her in, she said. Based on her history, she is extremely dangerous when cornered. I declined protective custody but agreed to stay with Maya while the investigation proceeded. That evening, as we sat in her living room surrounded by legal documents and evidence, Maya's phone rang. "It is Jake," she whispered, looking at the caller ID. We had given my phone number to the police in case anyone tried to contact me, but Jake was calling Maya directly. "Answer it," I whispered back. "Put it on speaker." "Maya, this is Jake Patterson, Serenity's stepbrother. I really need to talk to her. It is urgent." Maya looked at me and I nodded. "She is not available right now, Jake. Can I take a message? Look, I know you two are close, so you need to tell her to back off this investigation. Some very serious people are involved, and if she keeps pushing, someone is going to get hurt." "What kind of serious people?" "The kind that do not leave loose ends. Patricia has connections that go way beyond what Serenity understands. She needs to take the $50,000 and disappear for a while. Maybe permanently." The threat was clear, but Jake's voice was shaking. He was scared, which meant the net was closing. "I will pass along the message," Maya said calmly. "You better. Because what happened to the old lady was just the beginning. Patricia does not like being crossed." He hung up and Maya and I stared at each other in horror. "Did he just confess to my grandmother's murder?" I whispered. It sounded like it to me. I called Detective Morrison immediately, and she arranged for a trace on Maya's phone in case Jake called back. But the next call came to my own phone at midnight, waking me from an uneasy sleep. Serenity. My father's voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, desperate, terrified. "You need to stop this right now. Stop what Dad's seeking justice for your own mother-in-law. You do not understand what you have gotten yourself into." Patricia is not who I thought she was. She has done things, terrible things. And now she is talking about eliminating the problem. For the first time since this nightmare began, my father sounded like the man who raised me scared and desperate, but not evil. Dad, are you finally ready to tell me the truth? Meet me tomorrow morning at Riverside Park, by the old oak tree, where we used to have picnics. Come alone. I will tell you everything, but you have to promise me you will take whatever money you can get and leave town. Patricia has already killed people for less than what you know. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in the darkness. The next morning, Detective Morrison insisted on having surveillance at the park while I met with my father. I found him sitting on our old picnic bench, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past week. Dad. When he looked up, I saw something I had never seen before: complete defeat. His hands were shaking, his eyes were red with exhaustion or tears, and he seemed to have trouble focusing on my face. I never meant for it to go this far, he said quietly. When I married Patricia, I thought I was getting a second chance at happiness. I was lonely after your mother died, and she seemed so caring, so interested in our family. When did you realize what she really was? About a year ago, when she started pushing me to ask your grandmother for money. When I refused, she showed me photos, evidence that she had been researching our family for months before we even met. She knew about your grandmother's assets, your inheritance, even your mother's life insurance money that I had saved for your college fund. My blood turned cold. What life insurance money? $50,000 that your mother left specifically for you. I was going to give it to you when you graduated college, but Patricia found out about it and convinced me to invest it in her business ventures. We lost everything. So even the $50,000 they were offering me was mine to begin with, stolen from an inheritance my mother had intended for me. Dad, did you know Patricia was married to other men? That they died under suspicious circumstances? His face crumpled completely. I found out 3 days ago. She told me herself, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate lonely widowers. She said your grandmother was just practice for bigger targets. Is that when you decided to help me? No. His voice was barely a whisper. That is when I realized she was planning to kill me too. Once the inheritance was settled and the heat died down, I would have an accident, just like her other husbands. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the river flow past. Finally, my father spoke again. There is something else you need to know. Your grandmother did not die of natural causes. Patricia gave her something, some kind of drug that caused the heart attack. She bragged about how untraceable it was, how she had used it before. The confession hit me like a physical blow. Murder. My grandmother had been murdered, and my father had known about it. Why did you not stop her? Why did you not protect Grandma? Because I was a coward. The words came out raw and broken. Because she threatened to kill you if I said anything, and I believed her. I thought if I went along with the will forgery, took just enough money to pay our debts, she would be satisfied. I never thought she would actually hurt your grandmother. But she did hurt her. She tortured her for months, Dad. I have recordings. I know. God help me, I know. In the distance, I could see Detective Morrison's unmarked car waiting. It was time to end this. Dad, you need to turn yourself in. Help the police catch Patricia before she kills anyone else. He nodded slowly, like a man accepting his execution. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I looked at this broken man who had once been my hero, who had chosen money and fear over protecting his own family. I do not know, Dad. But doing the right thing now might be a start. 2 months later, I stood in the courthouse watching Patricia Patterson, whose real name turned out to be Patricia Ann Stevens Williams Morrison Patterson, depending on which husband she was stealing from being led away in handcuffs. She had been denied bail after authorities discovered fake passports and over $200,000 in cash hidden in her apartment, along with detailed files on potential future victims. The trial had been swift but thorough. My grandmother's recording, combined with the evidence I had gathered, and Patricia's own history across multiple states, painted a clear picture of a serial predator who specialized in elderly financial abuse. The medical examiner had exhumed my grandmother's body and found traces of digitalis, a heart medication that becomes lethal in high doses. Patricia received 25 years to life for first-degree murder, plus additional sentences for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. She would never hurt another family. My father received a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation, 5 years for conspiracy and elder abuse with the possibility of parole in 3. During his testimony, he looked directly at me only once, and in that moment I saw not the man who had betrayed me but the scared, broken person who had let fear override everything good he once was. Jake received 2 years for his role in the conspiracy. His cooperation had been minimal and reluctant, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He lost his job, his apartment, and what remained of his reputation. More importantly, the court invalidated the forged will and restored my grandmother's original estate plan. Everything came to me just as she had always intended. The house, the savings, the jewelry Patricia had stolen, all of it was returned. But the victory felt hollow at first. I had my inheritance back, but I had lost my father and discovered that the family I thought I knew was built on lies and manipulation. The house that should have been filled with happy memories now felt haunted by everything that had happened. Maya found me there one afternoon, sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, staring at the emerald necklace she had always promised would be mine someday. "You know," Maya said, settling into the chair across from me, "your grandmother would not want you to stay trapped in this sadness." "I know. I just keep thinking about how scared she must have been, how alone she felt when she made that recording. But she was not alone, was she? She knew you would find the truth. She trusted you to be strong enough to fight for justice, and she was right." Over the following weeks, I began to transform my grief into something productive. I contacted elder abuse advocacy groups and shared my grandmother's story. Her recording became part of training materials to help bank employees and medical staff recognize signs of financial exploitation. I also discovered that my grandmother had been right about something else, chosen family matters more than blood relations. Maya, David, Mrs. Chen, next door, even Mr. Rodriguez from the bank, these people had supported me, believed in me, and helped me find justice when my own father had failed me. Marcus, my boyfriend, throughout this ordeal, had stood by me through every terrifying moment. One evening, as we sat on my grandmother's porch watching the sunset, he took my hand and said something that stayed with me. "You did not just get justice for your grandmother. You protected every future victim Patricia might have targeted. That matters." The house began to feel like home again once I started filling it with new memories. I kept my grandmother's garden, learned her recipes, and invited friends over for the Sunday dinners she would have loved. Mrs. Chen became a regular guest, sharing stories about my grandmother that I had never heard. 6 months after the trial ended, I received an unexpected letter. It was from my father, written from prison. "Serenity," it began, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I am not writing to request it. I am writing to tell you how proud I am of your strength and courage. You did what I was too weak and scared to do. You protected our family, even when it meant standing up to me. Your mother would have been proud. Your grandmother was proud, she told me so in her recording. I failed as a father and as a son-in-law, but you succeeded as a granddaughter and as a human being. I hope someday you can remember the good parts of who I used to be, before I let fear make me into someone I do not recognize. Love, Dad." I read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in my grandmother's jewelry box, next to her recording and the original copy of her will. Forgiveness would take time, maybe years, maybe forever, but I was learning that healing happens on its own timeline. The most unexpected development came when Detective Morrison contacted me about Patricia's other victims. 3 families in other states had reached out after seeing news coverage of the trial, wanting to share their own stories of loss and betrayal. We formed an informal support network, helping each other navigate the legal processes of recovering stolen assets and finding emotional healing. 1 year after my grandmother's death, I organized a memorial service for her in the garden she had loved. Maya, David, Mrs. Chen, Marcus, Mr. Rodriguez, and 24 other people whose lives she had touched came to honor her memory. We planted a new rose bush and installed a small plaque that read, "Rosalind Chen, beloved grandmother, friend, and fierce protector of truth." As the guests shared stories and memories, I realized something profound. My grandmother's legacy was not just the house or the money she left me. It was the lesson that justice sometimes requires us to stand alone against people we love, that truth matters more than comfort, and that real family is made up of people who choose to support and protect each other. Standing in that garden, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family, I felt my grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. She had taught me that being grateful does not mean accepting injustice, that family loyalty cannot excuse betrayal, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let evil people get away with their crimes. I still live in my grandmother's house, but now it is truly mine, not just legally but emotionally. Every morning I water her roses and remember the woman who sacrificed her peace of mind to protect me even in death. Every evening I count the people in my life who choose to love and support me honestly, without agenda or manipulation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what is right? Have you discovered that people you trusted were not who you thought they were? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is know we are not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about family justice and finding strength in impossible situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they deserve truth and justice even when it comes from the most unexpected places. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, family is not just about blood relations, it is about people who choose to stand by you when standing up costs them something. Choose your family wisely, fight for justice, bravely, and never let anyone convince you that you should be grateful for crumbs when you deserve the whole truth.